So we officially have brand new information about a brand new official bill now that has now been released. So hey everyone, how's it going today, and welcome back to another update. So the big thing that I really want to talk about in this update is that, as most of you guys know from one of the past videos, there is a brand new program that was recently just proposed that's going on in order to try to boost Social Security by $200 per month, which in turn it's going to last for about a year. And if this happens to go through, 200 times 12, it means that people on Social Security are going to potentially now receive in total a $2,400 stimulus check, or just simply put $2,400 extra in our pockets, which is basically like a stimulus check. So the big thing is that in today's update is that if you are someone that happens to be on Social Security, this video will obviously be absolutely very important. But even if you are not on Social Security, I still do believe that it's relatively insightful to know, because at the end of the day, the big thing is maybe it's possible that maybe you do know someone that's on social media, on Social Security, so feel free to share this. But also another big thing is that it's also possible that even if you are not on Social Security today, maybe you might potentially end up on Social Security, so you never know. And also because the thing is that within this program actually, or within this proposal, there are actually also a lot of side things that are like side policies or changes that might actually still be very relevant to us. So for example is that there are certain things inside of this proposal where they're hoping to change things related to our tax system. So even if we're not into Social Security, you know, our taxes can potentially be impacted. There are also actually a lot of interestingly subtle programs that have to deal with stuff such as like for families and also for retirement. So if you are someone that is either potentially going to be retiring soon, or maybe you just simply put hope to retire someday, especially because some of these programs are hoping to try to last for something in the next, let's just say 30, 40 years, 50 plus years, that's why this is relatively important. I think it's just insightful. So of course, all of this is going to make a lot more sense, but as always, real fast, we're going to get right to it. But before we begin, remember to smash the like button if you guys hopefully enjoy videos like this. Consider subscribing, hitting the bell, or you guys can watch to the end to decide. But of course, it is always appreciated. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, or honestly, really just anything. It really is always great to say hi to new and familiar faces, and really just to hear from you guys. So with that being said, let's get this video started. So I'm going to put the official bill inside of the comments if you guys would like to read it, but because it happens to be very wordy, we're going to try to summarize it in today's video. So the big idea maybe to start with talking a little bit about the background story, because this is actually the story that they're going to be presenting in Congress to try to convince Congress to potentially try to approve it. So to maybe start right here, the big thing is that the background story to how this really came to be, or what they're currently preaching, is that essentially what the bill talks about is that it starts by mentioning about how back in 2020, so right when the pandemic started, this program, or specifically just Social Security, was able to lift essentially about 22 million people out of poverty. And then within that 22 million, 16 million that happen to be seniors. And the comparison really that they use to show a little bit of the before and after is that before 1935, and again, interestingly, there are actually still some people that are very much alive that were born 1935 or afterwards. But the big idea is that about half of the country, or half of the seniors, were actually living in poverty. And today, the poverty rate among seniors is about 8.9%. So it's definitely something that has shown lots of improvement. And the big idea, really what's going on is that it's believed by many, or not even necessarily believed, but just calculated right now, that without this program going through, they expect that Social Security is probably only going to last until probably around 2035. We say probably because every single year inflation is going to happen, so it's not always a set amount because they have to get new data to see how much money they spend each year. But on the trajectory that they're looking at right now is that it's really only going to last until about 2035. So what this program would do is that if it was was able to approve is that now it's going to be able to extend this program and fund it so it can go on for about 75 years. So if you are someone that is potentially going to be retiring in the next 75 years, which is probably very, very likely because the retirement age for many people happens to be 60 years. So I think hopefully everyone here that's watching is at least 1 year old off of that logic. It means that this is going to be relatively relevant. Maybe not today in the near future, but very likely eventually. So what this would do is that it would essentially extend this program. So now they have the money to be able to do this for another 75 years, essentially taking us all the way to almost or right around the year 2100 or 2100, depending on how you say it. Now, there is also another program that's going to be put inside of this proposal, and it has to do with the tax system. So this is the part that actually might even connect a little bit with stimulus checks. The big idea right now is that it is very well known, you might have seen other videos about it, feel free to share personal thoughts, that there are many, many very, very rich people inside of our country that actually pay about the same, or in many cases, actually even less taxes than many people making a just typical middle class salary. So how this really relates is that because there was a say that goes on that many CEOs that are making about $20 million are surprisingly actually taxed about the same amount of money as someone making $147,000. So not percent, they're not taxed at the same percent, but they're actually taxed at the same dollar amount. And now there is a little bit of a way that they do this. This video is not necessarily about how rich people get away with taxes, so maybe we'll talk about that in a future video. Maybe comment if that's of interest. But the big idea is that what this proposal is going to do is that they're going to try to change the tax system to lift up the cap. So essentially now people that make over $250,000, and this is expected to apply for about 7% of this country. But we're going to talk about how it applies for the other 93% of this country. The big idea is that if this was able to go through, it means that the other 7% of this country is going to now actually have to pay for their own fair share of taxes. And why this is very, very related is that because for a lot of these people, so this 7%, when you are making $250,000 every year, even a 10% tax, we are talking about $25,000, which is a lot of money. And in reality, an actual realistic number is probably going to be about 30 to 40% actually. So that is a lot of money because it means that if you are taxing someone with $10 million at 10%, which again, you know, it's actually much more closer to about 30 to 40%, but a 10% tax on someone that is making $10 million is $1 million. And that is a lot of money that they're going to potentially build up. Now, the great news is that for the other 93% of the people, which is probably most people that are watching this, including me, there will be no changes in our tax, in just the amount of taxes that we pay. But why this is actually going to still be relevant is that because the hope is that by increasing taxes now on a lot of the rich people, Social Security, or just simply put, the government in our country is going to have a lot more money now to be able to work with. So what this potentially means is that with a lot more money, they can now potentially take that money and depending on the state, depending on the representatives, depending on the people that run our country going forward, they now will be a lot richer and be able to have that money to now fund other programs. So what this means is that if they're able to have enough money, maybe this can potentially now lead to other kinds of just programs meant to put money in our pockets, whether this has to do with stimulus checks. Of course, that has to be approved. We don't know if that's going to go through, but most certainly a lot of the programs that already exist. So for example, things such as like financial aid for anyone that happens to be a family that maybe has kids. We're talking about potentially, especially because college today is about like $80,000. Just a very random statistic is that college these days, many private universities, is now about $80,000. So that is a lot of money if we're able to help potentially fund even a fraction or part of this $80,000. So essentially what this means is that if you are on some kind of government support program, or if you potentially get onto some kind of government support program, or someone in your family does, whether this has to do with things such as like obviously Social Security, because that's what this video is about, a potential child tax credit, SNAP benefits and food stamps, financial aid for students, all programs for seniors, for veterans, all sorts of different programs, and again, maybe stimulus checks, and also, of course, unemployment, which is what the basis of this whole channel and everything that we've been talking about is really about. It means that they're going to have a lot more money to work with, and maybe potentially it means more money being transferred to help those that are particularly in need. Of course, whether or not that money goes to this is probably going to depend a lot more on your representatives, but at least at this time, there are definitely representatives that support this. Biden supports this, Bernie Sanders supports this, AOC supports this, and a lot of other people. Even Mitt Romney supports certain select programs like child tax credit. And that is the biggest way that this can really potentially benefit us. Now, a couple other programs or changes that might potentially happen inside of this bill. One of them actually also happens to be related to about the way that they calculate inflation, because it is very well known right now, or if not, then at least now, because, you know, we're mentioning it, is that there is a formula that they currently use to calculate inflation, and this is very, very important because this formula is what they use to determine how much a lot of the social programs that we just mentioned will go up by every single year, because they're adjusted to account for inflation. So what they hope to do is that by changing the way that they calculate inflation, they're hoping to try to make it a lot more accurate now, which potentially also means that for people that are now in programs, or people that potentially get onto these programs, especially again if they have more money, it also means that they can now potentially get even more money. So it's almost like basically getting a pay raise for everything that's happening. Maybe they're going to use this to raise minimum wage. There's a lot of these numbers, you know, are being used for just to determine just a lot of the fiscal or just policies that our country implements when it comes to just doing things related to money. There is also, interestingly, also one program that they're really trying to bring back, and this is a program that actually exists but was kind of changed up right around 1983, I believe, or something in the 1980s, where what it's going to do, long story short, is that it's meant to help a lot of families, but specifically the kids inside many families that might happen to have a parent or a guardian that happens to be in need. So for example, things like maybe the disabilities or anything related to that. And what this is going to do is that it's also going to help increase the funding so that a lot of the kids within families with guardians or parents or people that might need it can now potentially also get more money as well. It's a little bit like a child tax credit, but the biggest difference is that this amount isn't fully set. It depends on many other factors, and probably the biggest one is that they're really using this to try to get them to actually just get through during times of a lot of need. And then really the rest of this bill, there's really a lot of stuff to talk about, but it really just talks about the funding side. So basically about which group, organizations, and companies are actually in support of this. Really just basically trying to maybe preach, it's a little bit more subjective, but basically what the rest of this bill is about just trying to talk about which groups, companies, organizations actually very, very much support this bill, to maybe try to sway Congress to say, essentially, you know, like maybe there's a company that they really like that supports this, or group or organization, so maybe there's reason they can follow in those footsteps if they support that group to maybe also support this bill. So basically just trying to gain support for it. But of course, all of this stuff, we just have to see what happens, as always, in hopefully one of the future episodes of this Kevin's show. But with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. That's really what I wanted to cover. If you guys enjoyed this, maybe remember to smash the like button. If you guys haven't done so, consider subscribing. And as always, feel free to comment any questions, personal thoughts, maybe if you guys made it to the end. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for watching. As always, stay safe, stay well, and hope to see you guys next time. Thank you guys so much again.